All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Conflict of Interest, the Generations podcast. I'm Kyle.
I'm Derek.
And I'm Jim. This is a Generations podcast.
All right, so let's start out the podcast, which will be on X-Men Apocalypse, with the trailer reviews, if you will, for what played pre-movie at the theater.
All right, sounds good.
So the first trailer I've got is the Doctor Strange trailer. What are you guys kind of thinking on that one?
Um, I know nothing about Doctor Strange. Um, the movie looks to be kind of an Inception ripoff from what I've seen. Um, so I'm somewhat looking forward to it just because it's Marvel, but at the same time, I have my doubts.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I don't know anything about Doctor Strange, so the previews looked okay to me, but I wasn't too excited about it. What'd you think,
Uh,
Kyle?
I'm very much the same. It's a Marvel movie, so there's a part of me that's excited to see it, but at the same time, the trailer confused the crap out of me. I didn't understand really anything that happened. I know in the theater there was big fan reaction to him walking up the stairs dressed up in his full costume, and I really was kind of unchanged on it because I don't know like anything about that character. So
Do you guys know much about the comics at all? I mean, like, how old is it or how long has it been around?
First off, just to clarify, when he says big fan reaction in the theater, he means the one guy up at the front who was clapping because that trailer's been out for months now, and for whatever reason, that guy thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
there were a few people in the theater that started cheering when he walked up.
I just heard the one guy who people yelled at to shut up. That was something that happened.
All right, well, do you guys know any of the history of the comics at all? Like, has it been around forever or is it kind of new?
Um,
I think it's pretty old. Not as old as some of the other ones, but it's been there for a while.
First appearance was 1963.
Oh, wow.
Uh, his team affiliations are the New Avengers, the Illuminati, the Defenders, the Order, and the Might or Midnight Suns, which I've got absolutely no idea about any of those other than the New Avengers and a very small amount of knowledge about the Defenders.
Well, that puts you up on me then. I didn't even know it was that far back. So I guess we're all going to be a little in the dark till the movie comes out and we go to see it.
All I really
Yeah,
know is he's kind of the guardian of. Well, yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he's kind of the guardian of the multiverse. He travels from universe to universe, basically clearing up intergalactic threats.
Okay. Sounds good. Looking forward to that. What other previews were there?
we had Now You See Me Too, which is actually already out in theaters. I'm excited to see that one.
Yeah, the first one I really liked. This one I thought looked pretty good. I mean, it looks like more of the same, but that's okay because I thought the first one was pretty good. So, looking forward to it.
Um, I really don't have much to say about this one. I didn't think that a sequel needed to be made. They went there anyways, because they always do. So I'm kind of indifferent on it. I liked the first one, but I didn't think it needed to be continued.
All
Uh,
right.
I'm excited about it. I wasn't expecting a sequel, but it's actually going to be part of a trilogy. So there's a third one in the works right now, and I'm pretty ready to see kind of because I know they've got not many new cast members, but like Daniel Radcliffe is a new one, and I'm excited to kind of see what's going on there. I noticed that they have a new girl. I don't know if she's supposed to be playing the same one from the first one or.
I think what happened was the actress who played that girl, I could be wrong, got pregnant, so she couldn't come back. So I think they just got a whole new girl. I don't think it's supposed to be the same character.
Yeah. Well, I think it looks good. Um, what else you got?
The next trailer that played was Suicide Squad.
Yeah, that one looks really bizarre to me. There's something about it that I think looks kind of cool. Um, I don't know what to make of that new Joker. I don't know if that's cool and hip or if it's just sort of weird. But I don't know. I mean, I think it. I think it. The previews made it look like it'll be kind of interesting. So it's just coming out really late this summer, which worries me that maybe it's not that good because it's coming out like at the very end of August. So good enough to kind of slide in as a summer movie, but at the tail end of summer, that's usually not a very good sign.
I'm excited for it on multiple levels. I know that the Joker is based off of one of the newer comic series that they've got out. So, it looks like he's some kind of big kingpin for maybe a drug ring, from what I could tell from the trailers. I don't know a lot about the Suicide Squad, but I know a bit about some of the people who are in it. Like, it's Deathstroke and Killer Croc and Harley Quinn. So that all seems cool. And then there's a Batman cameo that happens in it for sure, where we've got the Ben Affleck Batman. So that'll be cool to see. But
Yeah, I thought I noticed that in the trailer. I asked one of you boys about that if Batman was going to show up because it looked like he was jumping down a stairwell or something, and I thought that was pretty cool that Batman will be in it at least a little bit.
yeah, so I'm excited for that. But again, it's another comic that I'm not familiar with. I don't know much about the Suicide Squad. But in end, I'm still excited to see that one.
What do you think, D?
Suicide Squad is at an interesting place because, on the one hand, I think it looks good. On the other hand, the both the previous DC Universe movies that have come out, I've thought sucked. So this one's really going to be kind of the deciding factor for me at least of if this universe is going to be any good or not. I'm rooting for it, but they don't have a good track record at this point.
Yeah, well, that's another thing to worry about. I do agree that they've been underperforming a bit.
The next trailer we have is Independence Day 2, which I was absolutely not expecting a second one to this. It's been such a long time, and I don't remember being the biggest fan of the first one or really remember watching it very much. So I'm a little fuzzy, and I'll have to rewatch that before I go see the second one. So what are you guys thinking on this one?
This is another one of those movies that I kind of feel like, really, why did they make a sequel? It was a good movie back in 1994 when it came out, or well, I guess it was a little later than that, like 96. It was a good movie. It was kind of one of the big blockbusters of that year, but it seemed like they told the story that they were going to tell, and this seems to be. It looks like the special effects are really upgraded and a lot of good eye candy kind of stuff, but from what I can tell, it looks like the same cast and more or less the same story. So we'll see. We'll see if kind of an updated version which is really what it is. It looks like it's less of a sequel and more of like almost a remake in a sense, but I hope it'll be good. What do you guys think?
Um, Independence Day, I liked that movie. I actually not against the sequel for this one, only because I think they did the sequel right in the fact that, from what it looks like, the humans aren't idiots, because usually in a movie like this, you'd get the first movie, then the second movie would just be more of the same. But this one, it looks a lot different to me because now the humans have the alien technology that they've used. They've upgraded their arsenal. The alien ship looks a lot bigger. Well, we know it's bigger. It's according to the trailer the size of the Pacific Ocean. So I think it'll be at least a good popcorn movie.
Uh, I have some issues with it for sure. Again, I'm not super familiar with the first one, but You're right. It looks almost identical to what I can remember about that first one. It has a speech in it just like the first one that the president gives,
That
and
was the speech from the first one.
was he telling it again in this one?
No, they
Because he
used it
says,
for the trailer.
"Oh, yeah, well, that concerned me. That definitely made me feel like this was just going to be a complete rip-off of the first one." But then I also have problems with the fact that we now have alien technology because there's something more satisfying about being able to take on something like this kind of with what we have rather than using their stuff against them. Like, I don't know, a good alien movie would be Alien, and, like Sigourney Weaver takes it out using nothing but what she has. She doesn't need a big. She doesn't need to use their technology against them, and I don't really like the fact that they've got all these planes and stuff that are alien based. It feels like it kind of cheapens our soldiers in the movie. And then I don't know if I'm really big on some of the casting choices. I know they have a lot of the same ones, but then they've got some people who are just kind of stereotyped actors for the characters that they play, like the Helmsworth that's in that. He seems a lot like how he was in the Hunger Games movies, where he's really just like a soldier for all of this that's going on, and I don't know how much they're going to really develop the character beyond that, so I'm not sure how much I'm going to like this one.
I disagree with you. I think you're going to get that a lot in action movies. There are always going to be action movie cliches. People are always going to play a certain role. It makes sense that he's just a soldier because that's just the way action movies are. Um, the thing about the alien technology, I think that's just stupid that you don't think that they should use it because first of all, it's a logical step for this world to take. Second of all, we were able to defeat them with a computer virus from the 80s last time. If you want more of that, then it's just going to be like some hacker kid who's like 13 sitting in his basement's going to take down the alien fleet.
But
Yeah,
it just this one looks like such a big threat. It seems like something that would be more fun to watch him kind of take it out from the inside or something rather than just a lot of space battles is what it looks like to me.
The first one had a lot of that too with the fighter jets.
Well, again, like I said, I don't really remember the first one and I don't really remember liking the first one, so if it's a lot like that, then I may not enjoy this.
yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, like I said, it was a big movie in 1996. It was a pretty, that was kind of probably the biggest movie of the year that I remember, like the biggest special effects blockbuster kind of thing. Um, and I remember people talking about it and liking it, but not like going crazy for it. It's probably why it took all these years to make a sequel because there really wasn't a high demand. So maybe they've got a decent enough story, and maybe the special effects are going to be spectacular enough to really warrant a sequel. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. So that pretty much does it for the trailers.
You only had two?
So
Three?
four. We just did four trailers: Doctor Strange, Now You See Me, Suicide Squad, and Independence Day.
Oh, yeah.
So now let's get to the X-Men.
Well, you've been busy.
We had a little help.
Let's start off without going into any kind of debate over the timeline and what we should consider part of the X-Men universe in this situation. Let's just kind of talk about how we liked all the other X-Men movies, maybe our favorite and least favorite. We don't need to give our entire lists, but talk about what we like and don't like about the X-Men. So if we want to start with maybe Derek, who I know is uh, the one who least enjoys the X-Men movies, we'll go from there.
Favorite would. It's a close call between First Class and Deadpool, but probably First Class I like better just because That movie was amazing. Um, and my least favorite would probably be X3, just because that movie was a big mess. They tried to do too much with too little time. It's a big problem. Like Amazing Spider-Man 2 had the same problems. So did Batman v Superman.
Um, I feel like Dad probably likes them more, so I'll take the next one. I'm also split on the same two X-Men. I don't know whether I like First Class or Deadpool more, but I'll probably lean towards First Class as well. And then my least favorite would also be X3. I remember seeing that one and thinking that the beginning where Archangel is cutting off his wings in the bathroom was probably the most gruesome thing I'd ever seen at that point, and it made me sick to my stomach in the theaters watching that. And that was the first.
That was pretty disturbing.
That was the first moment I hated that movie. Was just when I saw that scene in the bathroom, I felt like going to the bathroom and puking. And
They had a scene very similar to it in this movie too.
but
We're just a
in
bit older, so it doesn't
Yeah,
affect
yeah.
us.
Well, I would say it played differently because, I was an adult when that other one was on, and I thought that was a really graphic portrayal of self-mutilation, and I didn't feel it was quite the same in this one for some reason.
I can't quite remember what part it was in this one. Was it the same character?
Yeah, it was the same character. We'll talk about it later.
Well, okay, so another big thing would be then
Well,
the
don't,
character in
don't
this
get
one is.
don't get into
I won't. Don't worry.
spoilers.
Don't worry. I won't. The character in this one was much older than that one, and watching that little boy in the bathroom especially got to me. And I'd have to agree. I think
Well, because
that
it was the little kid from Shark Boy vs. Lava Girl. How could you not feel sympathy for that kid?
Yeah, exactly. Special tie. He X3. Oof, God, they did probably the biggest and most famous storyline of the X-Men comics ever, and they tried to do it so
Sort of.
fast. I can't think of a single one that's more famous than the Dark Phoenix story.
But they didn't do the Dark Phoenix story. They did elements of the Dark Phoenix story. They didn't go
Well,
the
yeah,
same
that's
route.
that's what I'm saying is they did one of these huge stories and they did it.
Wrong.
Yeah, they there was that story, and then there was a whole nother story with some stupid kid that drained powers, and I didn't like him either. And yeah, but First Class, that was definitely a good one. I liked all the heroes. I liked seeing where some of our favorite heroes started. So, what are your takes, Dad?
Well, X-Men was another series I really didn't know before the movies. I really didn't even. I don't feel like I even really knew of the X-Men before the movies. I was just that disconnected from it. And I remember seeing the very first X-Men movie, and I remember thinking it was okay, but it took forever to get going. It was just this long, kind of dark, slow movie. And when the second one came out, I was thinking, well, I don't know if I really want to see it because that first one was kind of slow. But it started off with a bang. That second one was just boom, kind of took right off. So I enjoyed it. And I actually probably am one of the rare people on the planet that enjoyed X-Men 3. I thought it was pretty good. So I found my way into that world through those movies. And then what really wasn't until First Class, though, that I really found an X-Men movie that I was really, really excited about. To me, everything about First Class worked. The cast was awesome. The story was great. The music is spectacular. And so I was really excited about that. Now, of course, there was a different director for that one. And unfortunately, to me, it's unfortunate that he didn't come back and do more, because the ones that have come after that, I think, are still good. But I feel like they kind of go back to the director's desire for this sort of dark, slower paced kind of universe. And I just enjoyed First Class. I just thought it was a spectacular movie. So I'd say First Class is my favorite, and probably my least favorite is that most recent Wolverine standalone movie where he's in Japan or China or wherever he is. That just to me was excruciatingly boring, I thought. So that's kind of where I come down on him.
Okay.
All right. Well, our other movies, let's kind of go through characters first before we talk plot.
No.
And this one,
No, we're gonna give our general thoughts on the movies before we get into spoilers.
okay, fair enough.
So, starting probably with me, because I liked it the least. I would not recommend this movie really to anybody unless you're a hardcore X-Men fan. I found it to be very boring, too long. I didn't find. I thought the movie was a big build up just for nothing to happen, so I was not a fan of it.
Give it a star rating out of 10.
Out of 10. Probably 5 stars, 6 stars, somewhere around there.
All right. Well, I'm in the same boat. I heard from a coworker actually that he went and saw it and he was very disappointed in it, but one of his friends went and saw it with him, and it sounds like she's a huge X-Men fan and has read a lot of the comics, and so she liked it a lot. So it's a very comic-oriented storyline, and if you don't know a lot about it, you won't be as excited about seeing it as someone who has. And I thought that it was very heavily cliched. The action stuff was something that you'd see in any action movie ever. It was not fantastic with that. It had some very MTV romance going on between a couple characters that I absolutely hated. I wasn't very thrilled with some of the acting in it or the actors that they chose. But that being said, there was also good things in it that I liked. I liked some of the X-Men that we've known now for a couple movies that were in it. I thought did well. They had some cool action like fight sequences that I liked. So I'm very dead split on this, kind of like I was with Civil War, but I'm gonna go and give it about a 6 or a 7 on the star rating.
Well, I don't disagree with you guys in terms of the stars. I'd probably give it 6 or 7 as well, but somehow I think I liked it a lot better than you guys did, and yet I think that's probably an appropriate star rating out of 10. I wouldn't say it's the best X-Men by any stretch, and I also don't feel like it's the worst by any stretch. I do like this newer cast. I like this younger cast. I think that they're all very good actors, and I thought they did a good job in this again. I've become a huge Magneto fan ever since the First Class On movies have come in, and I was a little disappointed that he wasn't. I mean, he is integral to the plot, but I just felt like there wasn't enough of him because he is super cool, and I just thought that he was underutilized in this film. It does get a little bit bogged down at times with the number of characters they're trying to deal with and the kind of a somewhat convoluted plot. But you two had seen the movie before I did, and then Derek and I went and saw it after you two had already seen it, and you guys both told me that you didn't like it and you thought it was not one of their better ones. So I might have gone into this thing with very low expectations, but I do feel like it kept my interest all the way through. I thought that it was an enjoyable movie. They have made far worse X-Men movies, in my opinion, and so I actually thought this was, again, not as good as the last two that have come out, but it was probably it was I thought it fit the trilogy okay. I wasn't disappointed in it at all.
All right, well, if that wraps up our initial thoughts, I'm going to give the official the official spoilers warning. If you have not seen the movie and you don't want it ruined, don't go beyond this point.
Good deal.
Okay. So now we'll get into the characters, starting with Professor X.
Yeah, I got them all written down here.
Yeah, I've got my list.
He's also who I start with.
So
New guy who plays Professor X has done better. I did not think this was the best time he played the character. Probably the worst in my opinion. Not that he did really anything wrong. I just certain things about him didn't strike me as good. Like when he loses his hair. I don't think he pulls that off well. I don't think he has the look. I think he looks better with the hair. I don't know.
I'd have to agree with that. He doesn't have kind of the look we got used to. I've actually got a Marvel poster on my wall, and I'm looking at the Professor X that they have, and even though I don't like the design that I'm looking at, I like it more than I like this actor without hair. He seemed a lot more charismatic with hair, and I don't know if that's really something that defines Professor X, but it's something I liked about him a lot in these new movies was his feel and how kind of ready he was to face things, and he always seemed so confident.
You seem to be like very set on just that. I was talking in terms of
No, I know.
performance-wise. I don't think he pulled
didn't
off the best performance here.
He didn't have the look. His character in this movie felt kind of useless. In all honesty, I didn't really see like. I feel like the movie could have gone on, and Professor X didn't even really have to be in it.
I feel like every conclusion that the characters came to because of Professor X, they would have come to on their own. Even his role with Apocalypse would have come to that conclusion with Jean Grey.
Yeah, his character in this was not great.
Yeah, I thought he had been used better before as well, but I do get what you're saying, Kyle. I do think that somehow the appearance of the actor, the overall look, does lend itself to the feel of how, for whatever reason, just the feel you get about the character, and somehow he did seem off as he got closer to the comic book version of Professor X with no hair. He seemed less Professor X to me somehow, and I can't put my finger on it, but as you were saying it, I kind of got the same impression. And maybe it's like what Derek said. Maybe it's a bit of the way the character's written, and maybe even his acting wasn't as strong in this one for whatever reason. But I thought he was still a good character, and he does his story does advance the plot somewhat. Although, like you say, there are things that everybody would have come to probably anyway, but the way that Apocalypse was able to sort of tap into him to get a sense of where all the mutants were and try to start getting everybody together, that could only be done really with Professor X and that machine he's got, Cerebro. So I do, they did make his character somewhat important in a reactive kind of way, but I thought he was all right.
It's not even like Apocalypse did anything once he knew where the mutants were. He kind of just used Cerebro to rid the world of as he calls them, superpowers, which is just nukes and bombs. So that's all he used Cerebro for, but I feel like I said, if Apocalypse can amplify the power of mutants, we could have easily just swapped him for Jean Grey, and we didn't even need Professor X in this story.
Yeah, that's true.
Now let's get to... I've got Magneto as my next character to talk about.
Me too.
This one's a tough one. before he was with Apocalypse in this, I liked him a lot when he was living with his family and he gets hunted down by the police when they figure out that he's Magneto. I liked all of that with him. I thought it was cool. They tie it back to the original where he gets the pain from being in the concentration camp and losing his family, and I liked that a lot. It felt a little cheesy to me when he was talking to his daughter in bed about I can't remember what it was. It was like the good night story he was telling her. That felt weird, but it shows. It was there to show that Magneto had changed a little, and he
didn't really tell a good night story. He just told her, and it was very obvious from that point on what would happen with him when he said to her, he's like, "My parents were taken from me. I will never be taken from you."
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that seemed a little cheesy, and it definitely did kind of, we knew what was going to happen. There was no real shock value to any of it.
Well, but here's what I would say is that I think in the bigger picture of the character, because we know eventually, I know that we the three of us have debates about this whole timeline thing, but assuming that the first three movies are at least somewhat representative of where these characters are going to go in the future, Magneto does become an antagonist. He's the guy who's against Xavier and the X-Men, and he's the one that's, he's really against the humans more than anything. And I think that the issue here was that in the first two movies, he became such a likable character. And I don't mean that in a hero way. I don't mean like he was a hero, because he still did a lot of pretty antagonistic things to the humans. But like for me, for example, when I saw the first three X-Men movies, of course Magneto was the bad guy. Of course he was the one to defeat. And so I didn't connect to the character in any positive way. I just saw him as the adversary. But in the first two of these kind of prequel sort of movies or reboots or whatever, his character became much like the Governor in Walking Dead for me, where I hated the Governor in season 3. I just couldn't wait for somebody to kill him or do something to him because so much tension had been built up and you knew he was such a bad guy. But then in season 4, when they do that trilogy where he's out on his own, and you guys know that's where I kind of made my big swing with that character to where he became my favorite character. And looking back at season 3, I realized how great he was. And that's kind of how I've gone with Magneto, is that the first two prequel movies gave me something in that character that I really got behind, enjoyed watching. Don't agree with his agenda necessarily, but I just love the character and I love the actor who plays him. He does such a good job. And I think that perhaps others might have had the same experience I did, where he's no longer, how does he become this guy after the last two movies who turns on Professor X and turns on the humans to such a hard degree? It really needed something traumatic to happen to him. And so now, whether or not that was the best way to go about it or very cliched and done a million times, that's a different issue. But I think the intent there was to, try to put him on the right path, and then something so horrific happens that we see how he turns, and we get the idea, okay, now I see how this guy could be the bad guy that he is later on in life. That's my take on it.
Although this reboot series erased all possibility of the other X-Men movies, and the fact that, now Mystique is 100% a good guy. She's training the X-Men. But also, the way the movie wraps up, Magneto winds up being the good guy at the end, and he gets away with everything that he has done previously. They let him walk. So
I know.
I don't think he's going to become the villain. I think they're done with his story.
It's possible, and maybe that was the point, is that maybe they were, that was a turning point perhaps in another timeline or another dimension or whatever, and maybe this time, for whatever reason, he's gone a different way. I don't know really why they went that way. I just felt like they tried to do something big because he had become too much the good guy. they had to do something to turn him.
Well, I think the turn was just specific to this movie alone, and the fact that he teams up with Apocalypse. I don't think it's going to represent how he is in the rest of the series moving forward.
So, kind of getting beyond how he was in the beginning of this movie, what do you guys think of him throughout when he's working with Apocalypse? Because a lot like Xavier, I thought he was kind of useless.
I loved Magneto in this movie. I thought he was the best character of it. I think I like the way when Magneto gets his powers amplified by Apocalypse, the way he's able to like dig into the Earth's core and tear apart cities on the other end of the world. Although I don't know what he was doing at the end there with that bubble, that was a little weird. But I did think he was really cool in this movie. I thought his story arc with his family, with the fact that he saves the dude and then winds up having to pay the price because he saved someone's life, I thought he was really the best part of the movie, and that's where the only emotions that I felt throughout the movie came from.
I agree, but like I said earlier, my frustration was that there wasn't more of him. I thought he was so good and so compelling that there could have been more of him. Now, to your point, Kyle, does he do something spectacular that really, moves the plot one way or the other? Yes and no, I suppose, but because he certainly had stronger arcs in the previous movies. But I'm with Derek. I think he's the best character, and it's just I can't get enough of. They make all these Wolverine movies. I want a Magneto movie, just a total Magneto movie to see how that would play out.
I think the thing that Magneto really does in this movie is Apocalypse, at least in this incarnation, isn't powerful enough on his own. So they needed to bring in a big gun like Magneto because Magneto, with the amplified power, had the ability to tear apart New York when he was away in Egypt. And Apocalypse alone could just build a little sand pyramid. That's all he really could do. So they needed a big gun to drive the movie forward, to drive the villains, make him seem threatening.
I'm not saying by any stretch of this that Magneto was the worst character in this movie, because I agree he was probably my third or fourth favorite in the movie. I felt like they didn't do enough with his character after he was with Apocalypse. They underutilized that character for sure.
He did seem to get a little lost after he joined up. I agree with that. But like I said, for me, he is to me in the X-Men series what the Governor is in Walking Dead. I could watch a whole Governor series. I could watch a whole Magneto movie. Those characters are very compelling, I think.
So the next character I've got is Mystique.
Yep.
Now here's where I'll go worthless. I didn't see anything she did that advanced this movie at all.
Oh, really?
Seemed like she was just in. Yeah, I did. Not that I remember.
I mean,
Yeah.
she's the marketable face. She's the big actress. Without her, how would they have led that ad campaign?
Okay, well, that I hadn't taken that into consideration. I was
No.
thinking in terms of the movie, but yeah,
Mystique, the character, was so worthless in this movie.
yeah.
I'm honestly just sitting here trying to think of what she did, because she wasn't in the movie a whole lot.
Don't you remember? She was. She rescued Nightcrawler at the beginning.
Yeah.
Then she got kidnapped. Then she waited for other people to break her out of being kidnapped. Then she went up to Magneto and talked to him and did nothing to convince him to stop. Then she got choked a little bit, and then she started training the mutants. So,
I
Yeah.
honestly, sitting here now after watching this a couple weeks ago or whenever I watched it, I cannot really, even as you describe it, Derek, I can barely remember her in this movie.
it's because
Yeah.
she was never blue. You couldn't remember because she's just another face. Another
Oh,
marketable one.
That really drives me crazy. I'm gonna say this now. When she is blue, I don't think she looks good at all. She doesn't fit. It's hard for these new actors because we've already envisioned what they look like because of the original movies and Mystique in the original. every time I picture Mystique, I picture that Mystique.
Oh yeah, the original
And
Mystique was great. This
Yeah.
one is not.
oh, yeah, I don't like her look. I I don't necessarily like the character very much. She's she's there to really kind of add drama between, like, I know Beast likes her. There was the brother sister thing with uh, Professor X, and there's the romantic thing with Magneto, and it just I through the last three movies, I really haven't enjoyed that character much. Her best movie was probably Days of Future Past,
I thought
I'd
First
say.
Class.
As the character, I think Days of Future Past.
I thought she was good in both in different ways. I thought she was much more important to the plot. I think the thing about First Class is that she becomes in a way, she becomes the person trapped between the two worlds of where the two paths, Magneto's on one path and Professor X is on another, and she's torn in between the two. She believes in where Magneto wants to go. He believes in her as her natural mutant self. Professor X is the brother type figure. She clearly wanted more than that. He saw her more as a sister, and so it never went any further. And she's conflicted, and so that was an interesting way to do it because, as we know from the first movies, in the future she becomes part of Magneto's group. That's locked in stone because of the first movies.
In the alternate future.
So anyway, I thought she didn't do much in this one. She didn't further that conflict, I didn't think, between the two. She was a lot more of a badass in Days of Future Past, but I didn't think she was all that necessary in this movie.
Well, what the hell happened to her mutant and proud philosophy?
Yeah, you're right. You're
Like,
right.
they
She's
dropped
hidden it
that,
away.
and I wouldn't have had a problem with it, but they brought it up like 12 times in the movie when they're like, "Why aren't you blue anymore?" "Oh, because I don't want to be." It's like, dude, we get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Um. So the next character I have is Beast, and
Yes.
this is another one. I like that actor a lot. I'm gonna say that now. I really like this guy playing him, and it's a lot cooler now because he's an actual character in these movies, whereas he made maybe cameos in the original three X-Men. I can't even remember that,
He
but
was like a senator in X3. He was like
yeah, I remember
the
that.
mutant relations guy.
Yeah, but I'm very glad that he's got a part in these ones. Again, I haven't seen this movie in a while, and this is another thing that I can't really remember what Beast did throughout all of this.
He showed up, got
Yeah.
kidnapped, waited for people to break him out of being kidnapped, did a little fighting in Egypt, got knocked down a couple times, and then the movie ended.
Yeah, I don't remember much of him either in this one.
Yeah, that's a little disappointing because I like him a lot. But this movie had a pretty fair amount of X-Men that they had, and they introduced quite a few of them, which is another thing that they had to take some time on. So, unfortunately for the characters that we really like, we got a lot less of. Um, Next on my list is one that I'm glad they introduced in this movie, Nightcrawler. I loved this character in this movie. He was my second favorite out of everyone. He was a good fit, I think. The actor that played him, I liked the way the character played in the movie because it felt a lot like X2 Nightcrawler. I don't really know him in the comics. I don't know if he's about the same as he is in this, like very cautious and stuff like that, but I definitely liked him in this movie.
Yeah, I loved Nightcrawler in this movie. I don't really remember him in X2. I know I liked him in X2, but it's been a long time since I've seen that movie. Uh, they did. What I do know is they did buff his powers in this one. Another sign that this is in the same universe. Because
Well,
originally,
another thing is he never met the X-Men in X2. X2 was the first time he ever met X-Men, so now his whole storyline is different than anything that could happen in the original trilogy.
yeah, well, what I was gonna say was originally he could only teleport to things he can see. Now he can teleport to where he sees or where he's been before. So his powers have been increased a lot, just for plot convenience. It seemed like, but I was fine with it. I liked the character.
Yeah.
He was kind of the comic relief guy at times. Him and Quicksilver shared that role, but I think he was good for what he was.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you know this, Dad, but it's actually the kid from the new Planet of the Apes movie played him.
Which kid?
The background character who just drew pictures of monkeys the whole time.
Oh, oh, I didn't know that, but I thought he was okay too. I didn't, I think I was more impressed with the special effects and his fighting ability more than I was with him as a character because I don't feel like I really identified with him in any way or took anything away from him. But he was badass, cool fighting, and I liked those scenes, so I thought he was
This
good.
he brings up a plot hole, which is this movie has a tendency to make its characters forget to know what they can do, because Nightcrawler made it very clear that he could teleport, and yet when he's thrown into the cage fight, he couldn't teleport through the cage, and it was right there. He could see the other side of it. He had been on places on the other side of it, and yet for one reason or another, he couldn't teleport straight through it.
I
That
didn't
that
didn't
that the cage was a cop out. So you know how um, when the X-Men wind up in Stryker's room, Stryker, they're all powerless inside.
Yeah.
The cage was a cop out, and it did the same thing where they were like, "Oh, you can't." They can't use their powers to get out of the cage because when he's in it, he teleports all over that cage. So it was like a lamer version of that.
I don't get how that's a cop out.
What do you mean? Like they just kind of passed it off, and they were like, "Well, this cage you can use your powers inside, but you can't use them to get to the outside," which doesn't make any sense,
That's
especially
just
for
a
like
plot hole.
Nightcrawler.
That's not a cop out.
did
Uh,
didn't they? And maybe I'm remembering this wrong because I don't remember what the resolution was, but I remember thinking it at the time that it was weird that he could teleport all over that cage, but he couldn't teleport out of it. And I thought they addressed it somehow. Like there was just a one quick little bit of back and forth dialogue between him and another character where he explained why he couldn't teleport out of the cage. It was a
No,
complete.
it was Archangel was in the cage with him, or I guess he's just Angel now. Angel was in the cage with him and explained to him, if you don't fight me, they're gonna kill us both. But they never said, oh, you can't teleport outside.
no, it was he starts teleporting, and the guy who's running the ring on the outside said
Well,
something like, he was like, "Oh, you can't use your powers to get out of this one," and I was
I
like,
don't think so. I think
I rem,
he just
I
flipped
remember.
he just flipped an electric switch, and because Nightcrawler was teleporting onto the fence, he got electrocuted off, and the guy made a joke about it. Um, so, if I'm to believe that for one reason or another he can't teleport through an electric fence when we see him do crazier stuff in the movie, I don't know. It's a plot hole. There is no explaining it. I'm not the only one to bring this up.
No, you're probably right because it did strike me as odd. I just thought that they tried through some little piece of dialogue to explain it because I felt like they said something and I went, "Oh, okay, that must be the reason," and just kind of moved on in my mind with it.
Probably
But it
just
was
that.
it was weird.
Probably just that electric joke when he's
It
like,
could be,
ah, packs a shock or something stupid.
could be.
"All right, my next character was my favorite of the whole movie. It was Quicksilver."
Yeah, that figures.
You think I like him just because I like the actor, and I do like the actor, but you got to admit his scenes were
More of the
funny and they were
same.
but it's cool.
I thought, here's the thing. I didn't hate Quicksilver in this movie. Um, I just I thought one time was enough. Um, Days of Future Past had an okay scene in the kitchen. I do think that the X-Mansion scene in this movie was a lot better. I thought it went on too long, though, and I'll bring up a plot
Yeah.
hole about it in a second here that I already explained to Dad. Um, but I thought at the end, when he did the exact same thing to Apocalypse, although I do believe that the character would do that, I don't think they needed to slow down time for it. I think they could have just kept it sped up just like they did in the MCU with their Quicksilver, who I think is better. Um,
I don't.
but I didn't. I just thought they took unnecessary time to show it at the end. That whole scene was extended too long, and in a super long movie like this, it really just wasted time.
I think you said it before. He's comic relief, in all honesty, but I enjoyed seeing it, and I liked seeing the end piece with Apocalypse, and it definitely helped having it all slowed down because when Apocalypse catches him and is able to watch where he's going and knocks him down and breaks his leg, you wouldn't have understood what was happening if it wasn't in that
I'm
slow-mo.
sure that would have made sense for them to slow down, but I don't know. I just felt like the movie was too long. They should have cut things out, and some of the things like that, I think they could have cut out.
I'm not going to disagree with you that the X Mansion scene was too long, but it was also probably my favorite part of the movie. I thought it was hilarious watching him go through, and some of the guys he's saving and the way he saves some of them was funny, and it was cool at the same time.
So
Being able like
let me
that
ask you
power was
this:
cool.
there are two plot holes that arise in here. So number one, Havoc completely disappears from the scene. I made sure to pay attention to it the second time I saw it. He is gone. He is completely disappeared from the scene. And yeah, they explain it later. Oh, he was the closest to the explosion. He was not that close. Um, Number two, what are Quicksilver's powers? They haven't been explained properly because, on the one hand, we know he slows down time in order to move around faster. On the other, why does his music play when time is frozen?
That's him. He puts it in his ears.
That's retarded. How does that work? Can he
What do you
control what
mean?
speeds up and slows down? Is that what his powers are? Because I don't think so.
Yeah, he has to because how else would he be able to move people? Well, no,
See? It's
Man,
another
I
plot
don't-
hole.
it's not a plot
It's
hole.
because
though.
it's something
not
that
a
the people who made
plot
the movie
hole.
thought would be cool, so they added it in without thinking about it.
You just get so nitpicky with this stuff. So what if they let him play his music? Don't get upset about that. Like, oh, come on. That is too far.
Well, I think Quicksilver is a pretty cool. That's a cool concept, and I've enjoyed him in both of these last two X-Men movies and the scenes that he's been in. And I get where Derek's coming from because there's a lot of things growing up that I saw, lots of TV shows that had this sort of similar idea. Like in the original Star Trek, there's one where they drink this water, this contaminated water on this planet, and anybody who drinks it speeds up into a fast time, and everything looks like it's not moving around them. And then and I always thought that was an intriguing idea that you could be moving around quickly like that. And there were other shows. Now, there was a show called The Wild Wild West. You guys might or might not know what that is. But there was an episode of that show also where the characters were able to go through accelerated time. Now, what was interesting about that one, kind of in the lines of what Derek's talking about, was in addition, if I remember that episode correctly in Wild Wild West, in addition to going super speed fast, one of the problems they encountered was that the air would also be in that slow time. So if you're moving through the air accelerated, it would actually start to burn you because there'd be so much friction with the air. So, and I think that's kind of where Derek comes from is, how does the tape player or the whatever the heck he's got, the MP3 player or whatever, how does it continue to
It's
play?
a Walkman, I think.
A Walkman or whatever. How does he do that at accelerated speed? Because if it's things that he touches, like his clothing obviously moves as fast as he moves.
But then how
So
come
if
the
he-
people don't?
Then how come the people don't? That's
I
the
think-
dilemma.
How come nothing else he touches doesn't? How come?
Yeah, if he touches a bullet and moves it, or he touches
Yeah,
a
that's another
person,
thing.
they don't speed up. Yeah. So that is a little bit of a strange conundrum in it, but I do think it's a fascinating idea. It's a very cool concept. I'm very drawn to that. There was an episode of the original Outer Limits that played around with that concept too. There's been a lot of other things.
The new Flash series does it better. Clock Stoppers did it better.
No, no, no,
Clock-
no, 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 no. Now here's where I'm going to, you know, if you remember in Clock Stoppers, the guy who's wearing the watch is the one who goes in super speed, but whoever he touches when he activates the watch then
No,
moves
he had
in super
to-
speed with him.
He had to activate it at the same time as holding them because then it would count them as one.
Yeah,
that's-
so who's to say that when he
Still.
puts in his headphones, it
Either
doesn't do the same thing.
way, Quicksilver just speeds himself up. That's his power, is to speed himself up. He is just like the Flash. He is the same character, just slower, technically, and less powerful. But he is the exact same character. He is the Marvel ripoff of the Flash. He just runs fast. That is his power. He runs
Yeah.
so fast that it looks like time slows down. He cannot
Yes.
choose what else runs fast with him. His iPod or whatever he uses should not be playing.
Okay,
Well,
picture this for me. Imagine that scene with no music whatsoever.
Imagine it with different music that plays over the movie instead of in his headphones.
No, oh, it needs the
It
comedical
needs
song.
the comic relief because the movie was boring as it is, and they needed something to tie people over.
I'm not arguing with that, but let's not put down this good scene just because you don't like the fact that his music plays with him.
Well, so you each made a good point on this that again doesn't resolve it. But for example, like in Clock Stoppers, if the idea is that as he goes fast, because he's in contact with his Walkman, it goes fast. The only problem with that theory is that when he broke Magneto out of the jail, he was holding on to Magneto and he held onto his head and he said, "I'm doing this so you don't get whiplash." And Magneto just suddenly, was thrust forward. So Magneto obviously didn't go into that super fast time that he was in. So it is a little bit of an unresolved issue of how in the heck his Walkman can play at the fast speed. But what Derek said, I disagree with a little bit, Derek, that it's just because he runs fast. Because he stands still sometimes. He looks around and things are still going super slow.
That's just because he accelerates his body to that point.
Okay, that could be, but I don't think it's because he's running super fast. I don't think it's because he just runs. I think it's because.
Well, it's just technically him accelerating his atoms and then moving, but he moves faster than everyone else.
Is that how Flash does it too? I don't know that much about Flash.
Yeah, that's how Flash does it. And like I said, Quicksilver's just the ripoff.
Dad, you don't remember that episode of Super Friends where the Flash is frozen by Medusa and he goes, "If I speed up my molecules in time, I can break free of the cement."
Yeah, I guess I do kind of remember that. I guess I didn't know that's how he ran fast. I didn't realize that's what he was doing.
Yeah, it's... this is also an issue that's never going to be resolved because superpowers aren't real, so we'll never understand how this truly works. But the way they're doing this Quicksilver, I really enjoy, so I'm going to give it that.
Yeah, I find it enjoyable. I wouldn't say that the movie would be terrible if he wasn't in it, but I did enjoy it. Okay, I thought it was all right.
Next character.
I'm going to go to Alex Summers next, who is Havoc.
Good to
I
see him
personally-
back. I already thought
yeah.
he was dead.
I thought he was dead too, and why did I think that?
Because he was a cameo last movie, and everyone else from First Class pretty much had been killed off. So you just assumed over time he would die also.
So he wasn't one of the pictures that she finds of all the dead mutants
No, remember
from the first
he
movie?
was in the movie. He was in the movie. He shot the dude with his laser arm when they were in that one military camp that Mystique bust them all out of. The head Toad.
Oh, okay.
Oh, man,
All right.
I forgot about that scene, actually. I'm still really upset that they killed off Banshee without showing anything about it. He was my favorite character.
He was one of my favorite characters too.
That's disappointing, but I was glad to see him in this movie, and it kind of sucked when he died, but you know,
I thought it was cool that he and Scott were related because their powers are kind of similar. I thought that was pretty neat.
Real quick, kind of off topic. What was Magneto's daughter's power again? Was it?
She had the that one cartoon Disney character's power. She could talk to the animals. Which one was the one that sang to them? Snow White, maybe?
I don't know. All of them seemed like they could talk to animals in those Disney movies. But
she had that same power.
Oh man, yeah. That was weird. That was a weird scene with his daughter. But anyways, yeah, it kind of surprised me when they talked about being brothers, but at the same time, like you said, their powers are pretty similar, so it made sense to me. And
did neither of you put it together that their last names were the same?
No, I didn't.
I didn't even know this new guy's name. I knew his name was Alex. I did not know he was Alex Summers. I knew Scott Summers because I'd heard it through the first 3 X-Men, but I mean,
may or may not have just known that because I listened to other podcasts, so I could just be picking it up from there. But I could have sworn that they had said it in one of the other movies.
They probably said it in First Class when they're all introducing themselves.
Yeah.
And I just, it just kind of hit me, and I didn't really pay that much attention to it. But
I don't know the characters well enough, so I wouldn't have known really the name. But I do think those powers are similar, and it was kind of cool that they were siblings, I thought.
Except that Havoc in this movie was an idiot. Well, because I don't know what he was planning on doing in the scene when he dies. He just shoots a laser. And I mean, he was aiming for Apocalypse, but he was going to hit Professor X either way. So it was either he hit Professor X, or he winds up hitting a jet and killing everyone.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Kind of a stupid way to kill off a good character.
So now, perfect segue. Let's talk about Scott Summers. What do you guys think of him in this one?
Not as good as the original.
Not at all.
I thought I liked the original. I mean, that was one of the things about the first X-Men movies. That was a character that I thought was super cool for some reason. I thought his powers were neat. And so when he came back, and it was kind of a little bit of an origin story of him kind of, at the point where he turns, where he actually gets those powers and how he deals with them, I thought was fun. I thought that was a fun way to see what the backstory was to him. And, yeah, I don't think he was utilized as well. He certainly didn't know how to use his powers quite as well. But when the time came, he unleashed a lot of fury through his laser vision, which was pretty awesome, I thought.
How does he not know how to use his powers? His powers are literally looking at something.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, it's really Cyclops can't control his powers or can't use his powers if he doesn't have that visor, or I guess the glasses as well, because he can't see. He has to keep his eyes closed, and
Yeah, and so
what happens if he opens it and he's not seeing it right?
That scene at the end of the movie made no sense to me when he's talking to Mystique. He's like, I don't know how to control my powers. Like, dude, you look at things and it explodes. How is that not something you can control?
Well, it's kind of like Havoc, where it's a lot of energy that he's using and he can't really focus it well.
Havoc was different, because if you remember, originally his was just a pulse that would come out of his body, and he couldn't control which direction it went in.
I know, but still, it's a lot of power, and it's just launching from his head when it starts, and he can't control it. So when he gets the visor, he can press that button and send it out in bursts, he can handle that. And I think it makes sense, the fact that he's brand new to all this, and I wasn't upset with the way he played out that way, but I didn't like his character much. When I said there was MTV romance. It was between him and Jean Grey, and it was just such a stupid thing between those two. I hated that.
And there's two things I wanted to say here. Number one, I did not notice how bad it was the first time I saw the movie. I only noticed it thinking about what you had said the second time I saw it, and I definitely realized it was some pretty bad dialogue, like that scene when they're out by the tree and she goes, "You're not the only one who they think is a monster," or something stupid like that. Second thing I was gonna say, did it bother/bore either of you two the fact that we had to see Cyclops' origins all over again? Because it did for me. We had already seen that in X-Men Origins. It was pretty similar.
Now you're treading on something, because if you want to talk about X-Men Origins, now you're saying that had they not given him a new backstory, that's part of the universe.
That's so the fact what I was saying. I was saying,
well, this is what happens.
That we had to deal with it because we had already seen something that was very, very similar, which is him losing it in the middle of a school.
Yeah,
and
it was almost identical. But the fact that they did
it again.
The fact that they did that just helps us further erase X-Men Origins from any kind of timeline that's going on in these X-Men movies.
But we already know for a fact that it's not canon anymore, so we don't need to spend time on it. This movie was too long. That could have been cut out.
Just be glad that we didn't get a backstory for how Nightcrawler and Jean Grey and Angel and Cyclops and all these characters. I'm
pretty sure Nightcrawler's is pretty simple. He was born blue.
But just we don't. If you got to take one backstory, be okay with that and don't get upset, because man, can you imagine if every single one of these X-Men had a backstory that we had to watch?
Right. Well, to be honest with you guys, I didn't even remember that they had already done his backstory and origins. It was that forgettable to me. So that didn't even factor in. I honestly thought I was watching his origin story for the very first time in this movie.
Yeah, so I guess it's
the two Wolverine movies. Even though I like the character Wolverine and I like Hugh Jackman. That's his name, right? Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. Hugh Jackman.
I think he's a good actor, and I like him as Wolverine. But I, for some reason, did not really think that the two Wolverine movies were all that great, and so I don't really remember Scott's story in that.
X-Men Origins, I thought, was a really good movie. If it's not an X-Men movie, it's a really good action superhero movie, in my opinion, and I like it a lot. And it may have just been how into it we were when we were younger, but I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah,
some of that stuff is kind of useless. If you click that thing on the side, I linked you a picture of Cyclops from X-Men Origins.
Okay.
Next character.
We've got Jean Grey, since we already kind of started talking about her. This is the absolute bottom of my list. I hated Jean Grey in this movie. She was not a good actress, in my opinion. She had an MTV feel to her, and the stuff between her and Scott was just stupid. And if they were to overuse a character, it was this character. They used about the right amount of Quicksilver by not having him in every 10 seconds once he showed up. They used the wrong amount of Professor X and Magneto in these movies. But, did they overuse Jean Grey.
Yeah, I hated her. Not that I didn't think the actress is all that bad. I think she does a good job in Game of Thrones, but in this show, Jesus, she was just, I don't know. This might just be a case of, again, I thought the original girl was better, but I didn't think this new girl did good.
Yeah, I didn't have, I guess, quite as strong a negative reaction as you guys did to her. I thought I was happy to see her back in the character back in the mix in this one, even though she wasn't mature and she wasn't, herself as we knew her in the first three movies for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was a little corny and flat, but I guess I didn't have as big a problem with it as you guys did.
Yeah, so now let's do Apocalypse and his three horsemen. So starting with Apocalypse. Well, I mean, he had four horsemen, but we already talked about one.
Okay, Apocalypse was better than I thought he'd be. I didn't think he was threatening enough. I didn't think the actor was the right choice. He was super short, not all that strong. I didn't think he was physically threatening. I didn't think anything that he did was all that threatening. I thought he was probably one of the worst villains we've seen in the X-Men series to date.
Every single word you just said, I agree with. I can't say anything different about him. I'm trying to think of who the other villains were in the other X-Men movies. You've got Magneto, who was probably the best villain. Then you've got Stryker from the second one, who was pretty good.
Phoenix, okay.
Phoenix was all right.
Francis was better.
Yeah.
Francis did more.
The guy from the Wolverine was better than Apocalypse.
That was Stryker.
No, the Wolverine, the one where he's in Japan.
The Silver Samurai.
Yeah, he was better. And yeah, Apocalypse is quite possibly my number one worst villain of the X-Men
I
franchise.
wouldn't say he's number one. I just thought there was so much build-up for him. Everyone had been up to this point hyping him so much. Oh, he's the Thanos of this world. Oh, he's the dark side of this universe. Nah, he did not. He killed a couple people using sand, turned someone into a wall, and then built a pyramid. That's all he did. He just used Magneto's brute force afterward to do the rest of the everything.
If you were to ask me what the most boring power is, this wouldn't even pop into my mind because it is such a randomly useless power to like turn things into sand and to manipulate sand. Like the cool thing about him is he can use his powers to enhance others' powers. So his best power is making other heroes better.
He has certain powers that they just didn't really use in this movie.
I know, but for this movie's sake,
he has regeneration powers stronger than Wolverine. We know that just based off the beginning of the movie when they transfer Oscar Isaac's body into being Apocalypse. That dude originally had the Wolverine kind of regen. We already saw that at the beginning, so that's why they transferred into that guy's body. So, yeah, I think a lot of Apocalypse's powers were underutilized, making him just kind of a boring villain.
Yeah, I didn't have a strong reaction to him one way or the other. I didn't know anything about the character. I didn't know anything about the hype. So it certainly wasn't anything I was expecting something huge from that let me down. But yeah, I thought his powers were a little underwhelming. He provided Magneto an outlet to start fighting the humans again and to band with him, and it splintered the X-Men, and I thought that was okay. But I agree. I wouldn't. To me, my favorite villain of all the movies was Kevin Bacon in First Class.
Oh, that's
I thought he was awesome. That was just, he had so many powers and he was so manipulative and strong, and that character was just really awesome. And you stack up Kevin Bacon's character from First Class to this guy, there's just not even any competition at all.
Also, I wanted to ask you guys, because I bet neither of you two got this from the movie. It was terribly explained. How did Apocalypse transfer his body from one person to another?
That whole ritual that they did.
Is that what you think too, Dad?
That's the impression I got, yeah.
They harnessed alien technology, which is what the suit that he wore was, because Apocalypse is supposed to be blue, but then he has that alien suit, and he uses that alien ability, which is enhanced by the sun. That was not explained in the movie. I had to find that out afterward.
Yeah, I was very certain it was like a sun ritual that they did where they filled up the top of a pyramid with sun and it magically transformed his body.
The one thing that I can say I really liked about this apocalypse was the fact that he would transfer his consciousness into one mutant to another, and he would get the abilities of each one. I thought that would be a cool power to mess around with, but they didn't do too much with it.
Yeah, I
But
didn't
then
think
is
they
that
did.
is that his power, or can you do that to anyone? Because like if Wolverine was in that alien suit, could he transfer his consciousness into another,
I think that was that's I
or
don't
was
know.
this purely apocalypse based?
I don't know.
Yeah, it you know.
Yeah, Apocalypse was underused in this movie. I don't think Apocalypse is done. I think because we see him turn into a skeleton at the end of this movie, but I don't think he's dead. I think he will come back because apparently Apocalypse. This is something that he does in the comics. I guess he can regenerate from like a molecule up to a normal sized guy. And I guess in the comics he's supposed to be bigger. He's supposed to grow to be like 20 feet tall, and we only see them do that in the like mental world in this movie. But
That was actually my least favorite thing with Apocalypse
yeah, I thought
because
the
when
CG
he's
looked dumb. I
when
didn't
he's
think it
in
held up.
person, he is not scary, and when he's bigger than everyone else, it's almost embarrassing watching him.
You
Yeah, I
throw
did
around
not.
that term too much.
What, embarrassing?
Yeah, how is that embarrassing?
Just I don't know. It didn't look good to me. That whole sequence, that whole
Cause
dream sequence was the dumbest thing in that whole movie.
yeah, well, like I said, a lot of the problems with this movie is people forgetting what they can do. Jean Grey suddenly not knowing that she can just like enter into that world and double team Apocalypse with Professor X until he has to tell her like 12 times. Um, there's just so many problems. Apocalypse forgetting that he can turn people into sand, and he doesn't do that to a single mutant. So many issues with it.
So then the first of his disciples that we get shown is Angel in the fight rink at the beginning. What?
Gah,
Did,
he
yeah.
was
What?
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Angel. Let's see. He was okay. I like the fact that he gets his wing burnt off. I thought that was cool. That he was supposedly like this great fighter, and then the untrained Nightcrawler shows up out of nowhere and is able to take him down on accident, pretty much. Um, Another thing that I thought was good, I thought it was good that they went away from the comic book origin, the same or storyline, the same one they went with in X3, where um, Angel is like this rich boy who's got this like billionaire father. I thought it was cool to see him as like kind of a thug. Um, and then I liked the metal wings. I thought those were cool. That's the scene I was meaning to bring up before. When he gets his metal wings, you see his bone wings. They like peel off, and there's lots of blood. And then you watch his back split open, and the metal wings slowly come out. That's a scene that I found very familiar to the scene when he's cutting his wings off in X3.
Um, as much as I was not happy with X3, I liked Angel in that movie so much more than I liked this Angel. This Angel was very useless to me, he felt. Like you said, he was there. He
Here's
fought,
something weird. Here's
but he
another
was there.
power of Apocalypse's that he only uses once. That's still just like, where does this even come from back in ancient Egypt? Is the ability to give people tattoos and build them armor, because he does that to Angel. How is that even a power?
I think that was supposed to be him upgrading Angel.
He does it, he like waves his hand across his face and then tattoos appear, and then he moves his hand over his shoulder and suddenly armor is there.
Oh!
What is
Oh,
that?
he did that. He did that to all of them. I don't know
He didn't
what
do
the
that
heck
to
that
Magneto. He only gave Magneto like the suit. He didn't. I don't know. He
No,
didn't
he
do it
did
to
it.
Psylocke either.
It didn't show him doing it, but he did it because they were all, not all dressed
So,
up,
so
and then
then what made
it comes in and he's.
Apocalypse? Oh, this is just another dumb thing. What made Apocalypse think, oh, here's this Psylocke girl, better give her like skin tight latex? It's just dumb.
Maybe he made it all out of sand. I don't know.
How does that help?
I don't know. It's stupid. The next of his people is Storm.
Not as good as Halle Berry.
No, I agree and disagree. I never really liked Storm in any of the movies. I wasn't a Storm fan through any of these X-Men's. And
Did we ever have an origin story for her before in a different movie?
No.
no.
Because I again felt like that was at least something that was interesting, was a familiar character and sort of how they started out and ended up where they went. But I agree, Storm's never been one of my big favorites, and so if she had not been in this movie, I wouldn't have cared. But because she was, and they did have a little origin, and she was actually against the X-Men at first. She was on the other side. Was interesting a little bit, I guess, for the character. If they're going to do something with her, that was probably as good as anything.
Dad, you had to have enjoyed that intro to Storm, because when they go back to her apartment and Apocalypse learns about TV, it was Star Trek playing.
Twice now, they showed a clip of Star Trek in Days of Future Past. They showed a clip from the Naked Time where Captain Kirk and the Enterprise are going back in time. And then this time, what was the episode they were watching this time?
It
They were
was-
watching the one when, what's his name, thought he was Apollo, so he was not letting the Enterprise leave.
Yeah, Who Mourns for Adonai. That
So,
was
it's another one of it ties into this movie like the other one was time travel. This one ties into
the God thing.
Yeah.
Well, specifically Apocalypse in general, just because the scene that they play is the scene when Apollo grows really big in Star Trek, and that is the exact thing that Apocalypse's real powers in the comics are, is to grow really big, and he's the false god.
Yeah, so I did enjoy the little nods to Star Trek in there. That was pretty cool.
So,
Anyways, before you move on to the next character,
I wasn't
are we
going to
ready?
move on.
Oh, you're
No,
still talking
I
about
wasn't.
Storm?
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't really talk about her. So in the beginning, she had some. Really, her main part was to get Apocalypse moving, kind of. Because she didn't really do too much other than be the first drive to Apocalypse trying to take over.
I don't think that was really her intention either.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't for the character, but for the movie, it was like, here's the first mutant he can get his hands on, so he takes her, and that's when he begins
That's
his...
the other thing I wanted to bring
quest
up
for
was
cycle.
how dumb Apocalypse is, because he goes, oh, I'm gonna get the most powerful mutants of all times, and then he gets like Magneto and 4 lame mutants that have very weak powers.
Three. He only took 3.
Three
Yeah,
lame
but
ones.
Cyclops was cool, and that was not a bad one to take, but Angel and Storm, just like, if he was really trying, he would have gone for like Xavier and
Xavier, Phoenix.
Phoenix, Magneto, and I guess Mystique, just for the convenience of these new movies. Wolverine. I'd say Wolverine. He would have gone out and seeked Wolverine.
Yeah.
Not like Angel.
Which one's Phoenix?
Jean
Phoenix
Grey.
is Jean Grey.
Oh, that's what I thought. So she hasn't turned to Phoenix in this movie yet.
Yeah, she
No,
does.
remember that? No.
Yeah, she
Oh
does.
well. Okay, at the end, yeah.
Oh,
But
she
it's
does.
different. It's different though, because
Yeah,
you know how
she turns into the actual Phoenix from the comics, so you guys wouldn't know anything about that.
I actually have the Dark Phoenix saga sitting right next to me.
Well, you haven't read it. There's no way you've read it.
I haven't, but I have it right here. I'm looking at it.
That's what
Well,
she's
okay,
supposed
but-
to be.
We used to check out this book from the library, the X-Men Encyclopedia. She turned into Phoenix in this movie, and Phoenix is a good guy. But then there's Dark Phoenix when she can no longer control Phoenix, and that's the bad one.
But that's
the
the
one-
Phoenix Force. That's an alien force. That's what turns her evil originally in the comics, is an alien.
But that's who she was in X-Men 3, right?
Somewhat.
Was the Dark Phoenix?
She was Dark Phoenix.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, what I was gonna say. Oh, so I know you guys won't care about this, but I just think it's funny because there's so much controversy over the fact that. Do you guys remember that Asian girl who was out partying with Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler? Do you guys remember her?
Um,
She was
No.
never. She never fought in the movie.
Jubilee?
Yeah,
Jubilee? Yeah.
yeah. Her superpowers is to shoot sparkles, and so many people are so upset that she didn't wind up being in the final fight shooting sparkles, and it was ridiculous the backlash that the movie got because of that.
What does shooting sparkles mean? What's sparkles?
Like literally, she shoots sparkles. I don't. There, I could try and look it up.
How is that? How is that helpful?
It's not. That's probably why they didn't have her do anything. But
I can't even
I don't
imagine in the comics how that would be a helpful thing. But
yeah, me
I
neither.
don't. I don't even remember her.
That is her power. I linked you the picture.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how that's helpful, but
I don't. Yeah. Here's her in the movie. Um, anything else you wanted to say? Any other characters?
Yeah, I've got 4 more characters. 3 of them will
Okay.
be really brief.
Then why don't we
Um,
get to those?
So the next one is Cyclops or Psylocke.
Yeah, she was underused. I thought she probably had some cool powers, but we only saw them like once.
For sure, yeah.
I don't remember really.
She was the girl with the big pink blade.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought they could have probably done more with her. Moving on.
So now the brief characters. We'll start with McTaggart, which was the girl from First Class that Charles fell in love with. What in this movie? I don't know why they brought this character in, to be honest.
Neither do I.
I don't either. I mean, not that I thought it was bad necessarily, because I guess just because it was a link to First Class and I love First Class so much, I probably thought it was all right that she was in there. But if she hadn't been in there, it wouldn't have changed anything for me. I don't think.
Because all she did was she had the files on what was going on in Egypt. But what was that useful for in the whole movie?
It was useful because they decided to throw her in there to drag out the runtime, give Professor X a love interest, and pretty much that's it. Because I feel like the whole fact that Phoenix felt it across the world, or Jean Grey felt the Force across the world, that was good enough on its own. We didn't need that character to come to that conclusion. That's a big problem this movie had, was just so much crap to pan out the runtime.
Yeah.
Next.
The next character that we briefly saw was Stryker. This
Don't
was
care about him because he did the least out of any striker to date.
yeah. Well, I mean, he's the same Stryker from the last one, but yeah, you're right. In this movie he was beyond useless. He showed up for a second and then died.
He didn't die.
Are you sure?
He ran away and locked himself in a door until Wolverine left, and then we saw him in the after credit scene.
Oh. I don't even remember the after credit scene at all. I don't know what it was about.
Yeah, I'll have to explain that to you guys.
Yeah, that.
Is that it?
And then the last character, which you already said, was Wolverine when he showed up. And his scene was probably my second favorite after the Quicksilver, and also the most action cliched scene I'd seen in the whole movie, where it just shows the camera shots of like the guy's dying in the hallway, and then it gets to him, and he looks up into the camera and like growls at it. That was the stupidest part of the whole thing, but it was still a cool scene, and it absolutely blew me away because I did not expect Wolverine in this movie at all.
Oh, I saw it coming. They revealed it in the trailers, so did
I
not
don't
shock
remember it
me.
at all.
I thought Hugh Jackman looked really dumb. Whatever that helmet he was wearing, I know it's somewhat comic accurate. He didn't have the visor like he does in the 90s comics. I thought he looked really stupid. I could have gone without this scene.
Basically, aren't they just trying to put him in every X-Men movie? Basically, give him something, give him a minute to be in all of them.
Kinda.
I mean, that's
until his next movie, which is his last.
Yeah, I always feel like that's kind of what they're doing, is just trying to include him, even if it's in a small way. But was this supposed to be the take on him getting
I've explained
adamantium?
this to you. So yes, this was just there to explain to us stupid viewers who can't comprehend anything on our own without seeing it play out on screen that Wolverine gets his adamantium claws in this universe. Because if this scene hadn't been in the movie, we all would have been lost, and none of us would have been able to figure out what was going on in the next one.
Yeah, well, and then doesn't he kind of run out into the snowy outside, supposed to be like the kind of how they come across him in the first X-Men movie, like he's out there wandering around after that?
Yeah.
No, in the first X-Men movie, they find him because he's boxing, and Rogue comes across him when he's boxing, and then...
Well, yeah, but he still has no, like, he doesn't really know what's going on.
Now, that's the one thing that this movie had to offer, was that Jean Grey gave Wolverine a tad bit of his memory back. Jesus, mute yourself. A tad bit of his memory back, and so that'll play in the next movie.
So, yeah, I thought it was okay that he was there for a minute.
Yeah, I wasn't even convinced it was him for like the first 2 days afterward. I thought they just used a CG body double because it didn't look like Hugh Jackman. Now, I guess onto the plot synopsis. Pretty brief. I also have a couple plot hole or like things that I didn't like written down, and we'll talk about those later. So the movie starts out in Egypt, that ancient Egypt scene when Apocalypse is planning on transferring his body into someone else, and then is sabotaged by all the people. What'd you guys think of that? I personally thought that was cool. I liked his four horsemen there probably better than I liked the ones that were in it later. I thought they had cooler powers. So that's really all I had to say.
When this started, I was so confused as to what was happening. It wasn't even funny because it started and I was like, I'm assuming this is just introducing Apocalypse, but then it didn't really introduce Apocalypse because it was just transferring his body, and I didn't understand what was going on with the temples and his. You're right. His original four horsemen were way cooler than three of the four of the new ones.
One of them could crunch people. The other one could just obliterate souls entirely. Like one of them slammed people up against a wall and they melted into like blood piles. That is way cooler than flying around with metal wings.
Yeah.
Because you can do that when you're Falcon, apparently. So why is that a main power that I'm supposed to think is cool?
My take on it was that, knowing nothing about Apocalypse, nothing about that corner of the X-Men. I mean, I know the X-Men universe from the movies. That's it. I don't know them from the comics or any of that. So to me, what it told me was this was a character that had been around for lots of years. He had, he was a mutant in ancient times, and then because of what happened with the people that were fighting him, it takes us into the modern time. So he's this ancient evil character come to the modern time, being that the movie's set in the 80s, as if that's modern, but it's into the present for the purpose of the movie. So I thought it was an okay scene. It was an okay introduction for somebody like me that didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, just to clear something up here, I don't think Apocalypse transfers his soul in the comic. I'm like 99% sure he's just Apocalypse and he doesn't do that. So I
I
think
was pretty sure that's how it was
a
too.
lot of people may have been lost, even some comic fans. I personally wasn't. I knew what was going on, but I don't know.
It, because in the comics, what he was the first mutant, right?
Yeah,
Did he create the other mutants or no?
I don't think so.
I thought that after, because remember in the last one, the end credit scene was one of the the four horsemen riding up on a hill.
No, the end credit scene of the one that you're thinking of, or of the last one, whichever one, it was in early form of Apocalypse. It was just a blue dude moving a pyramid.
Oh well,
That
yeah,
was
because
before
when
he
that
got the
came out,
alien tech.
all of us were confused like crazy as what happened, and so I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's Apocalypse. He was the first mutant. And then I thought it had said that he created other mutants,
Could
but
have.
yeah, I didn't really like the intro to this movie. It was okay, but
Also, that's not how pyramids are built. You cannot knock a pyramid down by sending a big rock down a chute. That is not a thing. If that were so, every pyramid would have fallen by now if it was built just a hollow shell that has a pillar in the middle.
True, very true.
Um,
Maybe that's how they knew to build the other ones better because this one fell apart.
yeah.
So the ones that are still standing today were after that.
So, anyways, Apocalypse wakes up in the modern day because some dudes, for one reason or another, perform some sort of ritual that lets him free. And then Professor X finds out that the disturbance that all the characters had been experiencing was caused in Egypt, and then he finds out that Moira, or whatever her name was at the scene, so he goes to see her. Thoughts? Nothing? Okay. So then we get a montage kind of thing where Apocalypse is just jumping around from place to place, collecting his four horsemen. And I know I'm skipping a lot, but that's just because we've covered a lot of it already. So Apocalypse is jumping around, skipping from horseman to horseman, recruiting them. And then Professor X uses Cerebro to talk to Magneto, tell him to come back, that they can be better, blah blah blah. And Apocalypse winds up hacking into Cerebro, shooting off every nuke in the world into the air. So now there's just a lot of space junk. So Apocalypse he shoots up the nuke, goes to the X Mansion and kidnaps Professor X. Thoughts?
Real quick, because we kind of jumped over it. When Mystique is like getting Nightcrawler from that place, what was that whole scene about? What was she doing?
She had become in this universe. She was like a kind of like a mutant salvation character. She would go collect mutants, send them to this dude who would give them safe travel to America or just to wherever.
Okay, so she wasn't like recruiting for anything?
No.
Okay.
So yeah, that all happens. Professor X is kidnapped. Then the X Mansion blows up. Quicksilver runs around it, saves everybody but Havoc. And then, here's a plot hole I wrote down. And then, after that whole scene, everyone's standing outside, and suddenly Stryker shows up in a helicopter and shoots off this beam that knocks all the characters out except for Jean Grey, Scott Summers, and Nightcrawler, because they were all hiding somewhere else. They were all hiding outside of the range. Here's the plot hole. Couldn't Quicksilver slow down time and walk away from the beam? Yeah. He shouldn't have been knocked out.
Did he know what? He didn't know what was happening, though.
Yeah, but
That's like him.
Mystique grabs him and goes, "Oh no!" And then that should be the point when he slows down time.
No, but he doesn't know what's about to happen, though. That's
Well, he knows bad things are about to happen to him. Mystique
But-
makes that very obvious. You'd think a smart character would remember that they can run really fast right after he speeds up time and runs really fast. So you'd think he'd be able to avoid that.
It's like trying to dodge a punch before it hits you. Like you don't know what's gonna happen.
You can see the person winding up for the punch.
Yeah, but you can't just get out of the way that fast. It's dodging a bullet.
Oh my god! But this
impressive.
dude can freeze time essentially. He can do
but-
it.
But okay.
There's no
get
explaining it away.
I get what you're saying, but it's a movie, Derek. It's got to have some kind of force that drives the movie on. So
the
if you're
force
gonna-
in this movie is characters forgetting what they can do.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's something that had to happen.
I remembered it a little bit more like Kyle too. It struck me that he was caught off guard when it happened, and so he just didn't have time to do whatever he does to make time slow down. That's how I took it.
He watched Stryker land, watched him get out of the helicopter, and then watched Mystique grab him or whatever she did and start screaming. So he should have known, okay, danger, freeze time.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. It just didn't strike me that way at the time for whatever reason.
Anyways, now they go to the Alkalit Lake, where Weapon X is, aka Wolverine. That whole scene plays out. Then the end battle starts, and that's pretty much the movie.
Well, let's talk about the end battle real fast because we never really got to that other
Yeah.
than Quicksilver's portion.
Too long, too boring, not enough payoff for the buildup of the movie.
This scene, I didn't even really like Nightcrawler in this scene because all he was doing was jumping from point to point, and then, the smaller battles happened, and then Apocalypse came out, and you had Mystique and Quicksilver talking to Magneto, and it was not.
Also, I didn't buy it when Magneto switched sides all of a sudden. I didn't buy it. I guess.
And maybe you're not supposed to because we've watched him do all these good things, and then we lose it all, and he becomes bad, and then can we really be certain he's like good again?
Yeah, seems that way.
Well, then if it seemed that way, then you bought it.
I didn't. Oh, that's stupid thing of you to say. I didn't buy it. I'm just saying that because of the way the movie wrapped up, which is him and Professor X having a happy buddy talk and then going their separate ways.
To be fair, let's not pin this on that movie because that happens in all the original X-Men where they go and they have these peaceful conversations with each other and
yeah,
they go down this hallway.
It is not that. Those ones are like,
yeah.
Don't do what you're thinking, my old friend. Oh, but I will do what I'm thinking, my old friend. This one is like, oh, I'm so glad you switched sides and joined our fight. Will you be an X-Men? No, I don't think I'll be an X-Men. Humans are really great. They really prevail. And then he leaves.
Yeah. But, it's just trying to play off of how the other movies did it, and it doesn't do it successfully, but...
So there we go. That is the movie. Anything else to say about the end battle before we get into the after credit scene?
Good, Kyle.
I'm trying to think of all the other Marvel movies, and specifically the X-Men movies, and, put this end fight to those so I can give it some kind of a ranking, because all the other Marvel movies...
Go.
The Deadpool ending. Honestly, I loved Deadpool. It was an amazing movie in my opinion, and I didn't like the end of it that much. The end fight was okay. It was good. It wasn't my favorite kind of end fight. I liked it though.
It was better than this one.
It was definitely better than this one. The X-Men Origins, I liked that end scene a lot where they're fighting fake Deadpool. I didn't like fake Deadpool necessarily because he was way overpowered, but I liked that fight more than I liked this fight. I can't remember X2. I can't. X1 I can kind of remember, and that was a cool one where they're fighting Magneto on the Statue of Liberty. This was
Um,
this was quite possibly my least favorite end of any of the X-Men movies.
yeah.
I thought the Wolverine had a cooler fight when it's him and the Silver Samurai.
Okay. That all we had to say about the end?
I thought I agree that it was not as spectacular as some of the other movies have been. And maybe I just kind of got caught up in some of the special effects that I thought were really good. I didn't find it as bad as you guys did. I thought it was okay. I mean, for me, the last movie I saw and the last movie we reviewed for the podcast was Captain America: Civil War, and that big fight scene at the airport was so freaking cool that this certainly wasn't anywhere near that. It wasn't as good, but I thought that the way I remembered that in the movie was I remember being at least engaged. I was paying attention. It to me didn't drag on. I thought there was jeopardy in it. I thought there was some good drama, and I liked when Magneto kind of turned around at the end.
What jeopardy did you see in it? Because the end of Civil War was really good because we were fearing for Iron Man's life. We thought that Captain America gives that thing a little push and we lose Iron Man. In this one, I never was afraid that a single one of these characters would die because not
Because if
Cyclops,
they did, people would get mad and then they'd reboot the franchise.
No, it's not that. That's not on my mind at this scene. I didn't feel any danger for any of these characters. I knew everyone was going to be okay.
That I knew.
And
I knew everyone was going to be fine. There are no real stakes because, first of all, I don't care enough about these characters. Second of all, we know. I guess you could consider it part of this universe, based off the ending of Days of Future Past, when Wolverine is in the current day future, which is restored to being good. We know that all the characters turn out okay, so.
Yeah, I didn't think through it too that much. I mean, I remember, he starts turning one of the characters into stone, and I don't remember all the specifics. I just remember that it felt like some of them were starting to lose the battle, and if it hadn't been for Magneto kind of switching sides, some of them weren't going to make it. So now, did I really think that like these characters weren't going to be around? Not necessarily. I didn't feel that in particular, but because you're right. I mean, the rumors about Robert Downey Jr. and maybe not being Iron Man anymore, and then when Captain America's fighting him and it comes to that end, I thought this was how he was going to go out. But that was basically driven by the actor and rumors about whether he was going to do any more of them. So it wasn't quite the same thing, but I at least felt there was enough tension and enough going on that it kept my interest and was a decent enough fight scene. I didn't react to it the way you guys did necessarily.
I'm kind of built on that where it's like the end scene or the end fight. If I'm on the edge of my seat and worrying about a character, it's good. Because like Avengers, the end was cool and all, but I knew none of them were going to die. The Avengers 2 got me when they killed Quicksilver. I didn't see that coming, but I was afraid for characters like Hawkeye and Black Widow. I didn't know if they would make it out of that one. So that was a good end to me. I already said Civil War is probably the best end fight scene I've seen in any of these movies. But this one just... I had no fear for any of these characters. I knew they were good.
Yeah.
Okay. End after credit scene, explaining it to you. They were creating... Alright, so they picked up a blood vial of Wolverine to create... I'll link you guys the picture now. It is a female Wolverine clone called X-23. There were 2 other vials in the briefcase that he put the Wolverine blood in. These are speculated to be the blood of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, which would be a perfect introduction for the character Cable for him to be created and brought into the series, because we already know he's going to be in Deadpool 2, so that's where a lot of people are speculating that his introduction is going to come from. And,
Cable's a time traveler, isn't he?
Yeah. And that is...
How do these three blood fuse together to make Cable?
No, not the three of them. It's Jean Grey and Scott Summers. I'm pretty sure he's their kid/clone or something.
Huh. Man, these end scenes for these X-Men movies are not very good, are they?
Now you have to look up exactly what they mean. Marvel is simple. Bucky goes into a cage, or Bucky goes into lockup. He's done being Bucky because he's a threat. Spider-Man has a little flashlight on his thing, which is his logo. It's simple. You don't need more. You don't need to look up exactly what's going on.
There was in one of the Avengers movies, not Avengers, but it may have been Thor or something, when the end credits scene is them finding the Tesseract, and I didn't understand that one. But that's really the only end credit scene of any of those I can think of.
That one wasn't really about the Tesseract for people like me and you who at the time didn't know what that was. That one was about the fact that Loki was still alive. That was the big reveal of that scene. Was, we saw the Tesseract. We had heard of the Tesseract at that point. So when we saw it, we knew we kind of had paid attention more. We would have known what it was. But the big reveal was that Loki wasn't dead.
I think very specifically for the X-Men movies, if I were to give them one note, it would be don't assume that I've read the comics. Because I haven't. And you throw me off when you add in comic-based things.
Alright, so that kind of gets into some of the other points I wanted to bring up. First of all, I'll just get this one out of the way right now. I thought the special effects didn't look good. I don't know if the movie had a low budget, but in particular, I wrote this one down. There's a scene when we see a shipping boat, big thing, getting torn apart because Magneto is ripping everything apart in Egypt. Oh my god, that scene was terrible. And then the end scene with the X-Mansion being rebuilt I didn't think looked great. I thought a lot of the CG didn't hold up. Obvious green screen work also when Professor X is he's held on a rock by Apocalypse, and Apocalypse is like, you will deliver a message to all the humans and all the mutants. That was so clearly a green screen. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
You guys just have a more sophisticated eye than I do for that stuff because the special effects.
Well, you grew up more with
Practical
effects.
So it's going to be harder for you, whereas me and Kyle, we've been growing up with mainly CG, so we're used to it.
Yeah, when there's good CG, we see good CG, and when there's bad CG, we see that bad CG.
Yeah, I don't have that sophisticated of an eye. I think for the most part there are exceptions, but for the most part, for me as a viewer, I think that the CG is really far superior to practical effects of the 80s and 90s. But I should say really the 80s and before, because 1991 when Terminator 2 came out, that was really where CG got its foothold. There had been examples of it leading up to that, but there had never been a movie with a CG character like that before. That movie it was mind blowing when it came out in 1991. So, and I mean, it was after that Jurassic Park did the dinosaurs and everything that came after.
And Jurassic Park, from what I've heard, clearly I didn't grow up at the time, but from what I've heard, that was really the biggest mainstream overall use of CG. That is what proved to people that you can do a movie of almost entirely CG and make it work.
You're right, but it was Terminator 2 that led the way because people in the industry were blown away by it, but they didn't think of other ways you could use that technology other than a shape-shifting metal man. And it was when Steven Spielberg and his crew were trying to decide whether to do practical effects or do CG for the dinosaurs. And his crew kept telling him, you have to do this CG. This is the way to go. And they did some test footage, and then his mind was blown. Well, it was the same technique as what James Cameron had done for the Metal Man. It was just a different shape with a different skin, a different texture. And but at any rate, from that point, from that early '90s on, is when CG really came into its own, and for me, I think that it always seems to just get better and better and better. Um, and I didn't notice really anything in this movie that I felt was like bad CG. Now I do remember the scene where he was on the rocks, and I do remember that did look very much like a set or something odd. It just, my eye caught that as something weird. But for me, for me at least, I thought the special effects held up okay.
It's interesting that you've been saying that, though, because I think that movies nowadays have a severe lack of practical effects.
I'm in that boat.
For one, this is just me personally, but I do feel bad because at the time Jurassic Park was created, that was the death of stop motion. And though I do agree, stop motion is a dated technique by all means. I wish they would keep the same heart to it. I wish they would still have something on the screen. And that's something that Jurassic Park did so much better than almost any movie to date, is the fact that they had actual animatronic dinosaurs. They had a huge T-Rex there. It was not all CG. It was a lot CG, but it wasn't all CG. And that's a thing that this movie could take a note from, because this movie was all CG. Nothing was in front of the camera most of the time.
I think that the reason Jurassic Park works so well is what you're saying right now, is they had something there, and they're not getting too crazy with it. I mean, the thought of creating these dinosaurs out of just a computer, that seems crazy, but then when you put it to this, where they're like built an entire like city for them to stand in front of, and they don't do it well, it's like they're trying too much for something that they could do so easily differently.
Yeah, I think that there is some overuse, and I mean, I think George Lucas way overused the CG in those Star Wars prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3. And that was, I think, the worst example of it, where it was just like completely overused to the point where it just didn't, in my mind, it just didn't hold up. But and I see what you guys are saying. I mean, I think a little blending of it is probably good. It's just that, for so many years we saw that that robot shark from Jaws, or whatever they had, the paper mache shark, and we saw the blue screened King Kong in 1976, where you had the practical hand, but everything else was a guy in a suit, and it was just blue screened in front of everything. And at the time those things were really cool, and it was as good as it could get. But I remember even at the time, you could see the issues in them, and now it's like they can visually put very photorealistic imagery together. And yes, they do overuse it at times, but for the most part, it's pretty mind-blowing compared to where things were prior to all that CG.
Here is probably, I'll send it to you guys now, the best example of a movie, modern day, of a movie that uses practical effects and looks good.
Godzilla.
The new Godzilla movie is using a suit. They're using CG the way it's supposed to be used. They're using suitmation, whether or not you like the design. They're using suitmation, enhancing it with CG, and it looks great.
Yeah, well, yeah, like anything, it can be overdone. CG can be overdone. And if that's what you guys felt in this movie, then I can't say that you're wrong. To me, it didn't come across as bad to me. Like you guys said, you can see it much clearer than I can for some reason. You guys can really, you're a more sophisticated viewers here in the new millennium than my brain allows me to be from all those years of practical effects that weren't done all that great.
Just a couple more, maybe 4 more things I wanted to say, quick things. Number 1, here was a big plot hole I had with that whole end scene when Apocalypse was trying to transfer his soul into Xavier. Couldn't Professor X just roll off the power switcher platform, and Apocalypse would have to like go pick him up and put him back on. Like he makes a big deal out of the fact that they're running out of time, but had he just like moved himself off of the thing, problem solved.
He was locked down, wasn't he?
No. He only got locked down once the suit started forming around him. So
I never
was that.
didn't think.
There's that. There was. Here's an interesting thing I had to question about. So Apocalypse wants to transfer his soul into Xavier. Wouldn't that just make him a cripple? Would he or would he not be a cripple?
Wait, what is he gaining from becoming Xavier?
According to him, he gains the ability to control everyone on Earth at once using mind control.
Can Xavier do that?
In
Well-
this movie, he can because he gets the enhanced powers from Apocalypse.
Well, he uses people to talk in the other ones, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he like in Days of Future Past, he controls that one dude to walk up to Magneto and start talking to him. When he's
Yeah, I got the impression he could focus in on certain people and do that, but I didn't get the impression it was as vast as what Apocalypse wanted.
Well, no, Apocalypse has the guys. Apocalypse can enhance powers.
But that's
Yeah,
what I
we
was
know.
going to say. That when you put Apocalypse's powers with Professor X, then he can do some things that Professor X by himself couldn't do.
Why wouldn't his goal to just be? Why wouldn't he just like capture as many of these mutants as he can and start transferring consciousness so that he's built up like 100 powers?
Because I feel like at
Why?
this
Why
point,
is his? Why is he run the?
Baraka, Deadpool, or whatever he's called from X-Men Origins, that dude could fight and win against Apocalypse.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, it was just something interesting. I feel like he would be a cripple. So, I guess one of the last things I wanted to say, do you guys think this movie works on its own? Like, could someone who had never seen an X-Men movie walk into this and know what's going on? Or, in your guys' case, someone who's not familiar with the comic, do you think those people should go see this movie? Because I don't.
I absolutely don't.
It's going to create a 2-hour-long podcast of one person having to explain to the other two about the comics.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that, like, my knowledge is certainly not as in depth as your guys's, but I followed this movie well enough. I understood the plot. I got who the characters were. I didn't get super confused, and I didn't feel like this movie in and of itself, you had to know the origin of the comic book characters or who they were. Now, would this be a movie that if you never saw an X-Men movie and you just walked right into this thing, would you appreciate it or know what was going on or have a clue? I would say no. I would say you'd at least need to do what I did and be somewhat familiar with the movies, especially the two before this, just to get a sense of who everybody is. So, yeah, I don't think it works as a standalone thing, and I really don't think it was intended to be necessarily a standalone thing. So I think it works okay for the uninitiated in conjunction with the last two movies, and I don't think you need to be a comic book fan to follow it reasonably enough to enjoy it.
So what it takes to see this movie is you would have had to watch Days of Future Past in first class. You absolutely have to do that. Otherwise,
I agree.
you'd be so lost with everything that happens with Mystique, with the fact that there's so many already developed characters, with the backstory of all these characters, and you would have had to have heard of Wolverine somehow in this world. You would have had to conjure up the ability to understand the character of
He
Wolverine
was in Days
because
of Future Past, so that's not a problem.
okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that's
But then
all
that
it
creates a
takes.
problem, because if then they're going to only have seen these 3 movies, then they're not going to know about anything going on in Days of Future Past. So you really have to watch all of these garbage movies in this pretty ruined franchise in order to watch this movie and enjoy it on some level. And I did not, even though I had seen all the movies. So that's
I
really where I stand
wish.
on it.
I really wish that with First Class they had really rebooted this franchise. And First Class hits, and then
And then
Man,
end it
you
there,
could-
because it was good.
no, you can still make more, but just you could have just kept developing the school. Really, is how the franchise could have gone. Is Xavier and the initial X-Men are there, and now they start teaching further X-Men in each movie. You're
That
introduced
sounds
to
like a
new ones,
boring
and
movie.
no, like listen, you have your X-Men and you know what they can do, and they're off doing things, but at the same time they're teaching new students, and these new students in the movies are field tested because of a new threat that's shown up. This is how it should have gone,
Kind of how this
but
one was.
yeah, this one is how it should have been in the last one, kind of, where you introduce new X-Men and then you you build from there, but the fact that they tried to tie it in with the originals just makes this whole universe impossibly hard to deal with.
So, finally, this movie being compared to the most recent in the X-Men franchise and the highest grossing in the X-Men franchise, Deadpool, how do you think is stacked up? Because Deadpool, in my opinion, crushes this movie a million times over.
In if you guys remember my list, Deadpool was first or second, and this one was second to last on my list.
Well,
This was
viewers
one
don't
of
know that.
okay. Well, in my list, it went First Class, and then Deadpool, and then all of them in between, and then it was the Apocalypse was the second to last, and the last was X3. So it's very clear that Deadpool just dominates over this movie because it was not my favorite of this franchise whatsoever, and Deadpool it was such a good one.
I thought Deadpool was good. I didn't think it was great. I thought it was good. I like Ryan Reynolds, but a lot of his shtick got old to me in that movie. Um, a lot of breaking of the fourth wall. Some of that was good. It kind of got a little bit too much, I thought. Um, I thought Deadpool was okay. If I had a choice, this is just me, if I had a choice of watching X-Men Apocalypse or Deadpool, I would choose X-Men Apocalypse. I would choose that whole universe. I would choose all these stories over Deadpool. Not that I think Deadpool was bad. I just like this stuff better. To me, where I got disappointed with this one, in addition to the things we've already talked about, that it wasn't the best effort by these guys. But the one thing I was really disappointed by was the fact that in First Class, it takes place during the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s. Very cool. Lots of period things. The music had kind of a period feel. The clothing did. And it's set against a real life thing that happened and was just a neat take on that. Days of Future Past takes place in the 1970s. They're interacting with President Nixon. There's this flavor of the 70s in that movie. This movie takes place in the 80s for no real reason, other than it's just saying, hey, it's 10 years more. Nothing about the 80s came alive to me in this movie. There was no political backdrop or any figures that I remember that were necessarily notable.
There was one scene where they're taking Nightcrawler to the movies, I think, and they walk past some people dressed up in Michael Jackson clothes, and that was the only that and Quicksilver listening to that song.
Reference. That was a Star Wars reference.
Yeah, but
and
that
Star
stuff
Wars
is
reference was a fourth wall break, and it was a bad choice because in that fourth wall break they go, everyone knows the third movie's the worst, poking fun at how bad everyone received X-Men 3, and this is the third movie in this trilogy, and no one's going to deny that this one's the worst.
no doubt. No, I agree with that. I was really hoping, because the first two I thought did a very good job of sort of bringing the period issues alive. And since I was your guys' age back in the 1980s, that's kind of the decade that I really remember and I really enjoyed. It was, I became an adult, and I went from being a kid in junior high school when the 80s started to, being in my profession and being an adult. And and in the world when the 80s ended. And so that it was a lot of transition in my life at the time. And a lot about the 80s still, is very much alive inside me. And this movie did nothing with that. And so I thought that was kind of a disappointment. But overall, like I said, I didn't think it was as bad as you guys did. And I feel like when you take it into context of the First Class and Days of Future Past, I think the three movies together are pretty enjoyable.
So I guess wrapping it up now, at the end of the day, X-Men Apocalypse is a big waste of time, money, and life. Don't go see this movie, you will regret it, and that's all I had to say.
I'm not going to go that far. It has enjoyable things. Some of the action's pretty cool. If nothing else, and I know Derek won't agree, but see it for Quicksilver because his scenes are pretty fun. But maybe not full theater ticket price, but this might be a good Netflix or Redbox movie.
That's the other thing. I guess we really should be talking about should people buying it on DVD or Blu-ray, because this movie came out like a month and a half ago, so no one's going to be watching this brand new. So I guess, actually, in that case, do you guys think it's worthy of buying? I know we're going to buy it anyways, but do you think it's worthy of buying? Because I don't think it's worthy of buying.
The only way you buy this is if you've bought at least the last two in this trilogy. You have to have First Class and Days of Future Past, otherwise it's so pointless to buy this movie.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, if you're not into buying them and having them, then wait for this to be on Netflix or on demand or something where you don't have to pay a lot of extra for it. I mean, I do agree with that.
If you're willing, I guarantee HBO has this and plays this 100 times when it comes out. So.
Yeah. All right, boys. Well, this was another fun podcast, and I think we gave it some generational perspective for sure. You guys have anything else you want to say?
Nope.
All right. Thanks for those of you listening, and we'll see you next time on the Conflict of Interest Generations podcast.